Alright, so last week was all about graphing quadratics. This week is all about solving quadratic functions. Write this down as we discuss things. It is still important that you know how to find the vertex and the 5 key points. I'm probably going to be adding those to your assignments just to make sure you still know how to do them. But the thing you need to know about today is just that we are adding a new algebraic step to you. So we're going to solve quadratic equations doing algebraic steps. So for example, we know that if something is added, we subtract it, just like if it's subtracted, we add it. If something is multiplied, we divide it, or if it's being divided, then we multiply it. Same thing. Squares and square roots are opposites of each other, so whenever you do that step, it actually cancels out the square root. The last thing I need you to write down is this part right here, because this is key. On the assignments that you have, I am not going to give you a warning that there are two answers. I'm just going to give you a blank, and it's up to you to type in the answers the way they're supposed to. As you'll see later, there is no plus or minus sign, so you'll just type 3 and -3. But going back to this, something squared equals 9. 3 is an answer because we know 3 times 3 is 9. But -3 times -3, because two negatives make a positive, is also 9, which is why there are two answers actually to that question. And so whenever you do this on your test and quiz, you either need to put 3 and -3 or plus or minus 3 as your answer there. But again, we'll talk about that as we go there. But the bottom line here is, when you're working this out, we are simply adding one more step, and you're solving still the same. You still move the weakest piece, and in this case the 75 is the weakest in terms of order of operations, and so we add 75 to both sides first, bringing down 3x squared equals 75. In terms of order of operations, the weakest is not the exponent, because remember, it's PEMDAS. So this is the lowest, this goes next, and this goes last because that's the strongest. So we get rid of the multiplication first. Dividing by 3, you get x squared equals 25. And the last thing we do is to undo a square, as I said up here. If you want to get rid of a square, you square root both sides. But the trick is, when you get the answer of 5, remember that there are two answers here. It's plus or minus 5. And again, that's going to be the hardest part to this, is making sure you put your plus or minus in front. A lot of times when you do your computer work today, you might miss it a few times just trying to remember. But again, once you bring it up and ask me about it, I'll be able to tell you that that's pretty much what you're missing, is the plus or minus. It takes people a while sometimes to get used to the plus or minus part of it, but as I said, just make sure you work as hard as you can and you will get there. That's a guarantee. Word problems here, it's from the book, which is why I had to add this in, because I needed a third piece. But Aquarium is designing a new exhibit to showcase tropical fish. The exhibit is going to include a tank with a rectangular prism with a length L that is twice the width W. The volume of the tank is 420. What is the width to the nearest tenth of a foot? And of course, in the picture that you don't see in the book, the height is 3 feet. The thing about volume, area of course is length times width. That's two-dimensional. Volume is three-dimensional. It's length times width times height. And you can't have two variables in one problem to solve it. So what we have here is this statement gives us a connection. It says the length is twice the width W. So L is equal to 2W, which means that I can substitute 2W for L here. It also says the volume is 420, so 420 goes here. L turns into 2W. W stays, and H, as I said, is 3, and this is where we are. Alright, when we multiply this out, you get 2 times 3 is 6, and then there are two W's in this group, which makes W squared. And that's where we go first. Again, now you want to find the width, which means we have to solve. And of course, remember, the square is stronger than the 6, so we divide both sides by 6, getting the answer of 70 equals W squared. And again, in order to get rid of the squared, we square root both sides. That's an ugly number, but we can do that in our calculator. Again, second x squared is how you get that up into your calculator. So second x squared is 70, and we get 8.36, and they wanted the nearest tenth of a foot, so it means we want tenths, which is the first number. So 8.4 is your width of that pool. Again, the solving isn't so bad. It's just making sure you know the order to go. And again, pulling the weakest piece down to the strongest piece is really where you're going with that. problem 3 just gives us something else to think about. Again, weakest to strongest. Remember, parentheses at the top is the strongest, so we don't touch that until we get rid of this 5. Notice it's 5 times the full set of parentheses. So what we do here is we divide by 5. Again, these 5's cancel. X squared minus 10 comes down with 15 as your answer. Now the weakest piece is the 10, because remember the power is, or the exponent, stronger than the subtraction, so we add 10 to both sides, getting x squared equals 25. And then again, using algebra to get rid of this, we square root both sides, and x is equal to, don't forget it is plus or minus 5. Now your question might be, why didn't we put plus or minus 8.4? But if you think about it, you're talking about the width of a tank. There's no such thing as a negative width, so we didn't think about it that way, which is why we didn't stress it. But in terms of a general solve problem, you have to remember that there are 2 answers in that. If you're talking length, distance, anything like that, time, you usually don't even consider the negative value of the problem, so that's why I did not consider, or didn't think about it in the first part. But again, when you square root, there will always be 2 answers on that, so just kind of keep that in mind, and then think about whenever that's not feasible as an answer. Alright, and then problem 4, which again is something else you'll see. It's kind of a review question, but because we've seen all this stuff, I think we should know what we're doing. It talks about the path of an object following a certain equation, where x is the horizontal distance and y is the height. Notice this is a parabola with a negative shape, so it's saying that the object goes up and comes down. And what it's asking is, what is the maximum height of the object? Now remember, if you want the maximum, that means we have to pretty much find the vertex, because the maximum is always found in the vertex, and it's the highest y that's in there. And so what we do in dealing with that is, in order to find the vertex, we have to find the key x, or the axis of symmetry, which was with our negative b over 2a part. Well, b in this problem is 22.8, so that means that negative 22.8 goes on the top. 2a, negative 0.6 times 2 makes negative 1.2. And so when I divide those two, I get the answer of 19. Again, that is not my maximum. That is the vertical distance that I go in order to reach my maximum. In order to find the maximum, remember, I have to now take this 19 and plug it in. So negative 0.6 times 19 squared plus 22.8 times 19 plus 9 is what's going to give me my answer there. Negative 0.6 times 19 squared plus 22.8 times 19 plus 9 gives me a height of 225 feet. Again, this answer is not what you're looking for. That is the horizontal distance. This is your y that you get from going that far. So again, remember that the maximum is the y value that corresponds with the key x, or with the axis of symmetry. Alright, so again, keep in mind you don't need to show work on this assignment, or a lot of these this week, but keep in mind that many of you are missing quiz credit because you don't show me any work, so you should still do the work on a sheet of paper. When I say you don't need to show me your work, it doesn't mean that you should do work. You should do work on the sheet of paper, because that's what successful math students do. The first 10 questions are to be sure that you remember the fact that square rooting gives 2 answers. There is no plus minus sign on the computer, so you are going to have to type, instead of plus or minus 6, you just type in 6 comma negative 6 or negative 6 comma 6 into your computer. And again, that's how all your answers are going to work. Whenever there are 2 answers, just type both of them in using a comma, and when it marks you wrong and you don't know why, that's when you can bring it up and I can remind you that there are 2 answers. So just keep that in mind as you do that. But other than that, go ahead and go to the Math Excel assignment and begin working on that, and good luck. Let me know if there's any issues that you have.